WrestlePalooza was already buzzing with energy, but nothing could prepare the crowd for what happened after Brock Lesnar crushed John Cena in a brutal showdown. Just when everyone thought the night had peaked, Paul Heyman stepped up to the mic, and what he said sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling world. Heyman's words weren't just fiery promos or typical hype. They cut deep, exposing raw truths about the industry that fans had only whispered about behind closed doors. With a voice full of intensity and frustration, Heyman shattered the usual script, challenging everything we thought we knew about wrestling's heroes, the corporate machine, and the real meaning of legitimacy. This was more than a speech, it was a reckoning nobody saw coming. The moment of truth. Paul Heyman takes the mic. With the crowd still reeling, the arena's lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the sea of spectators. Then, from the shadows, emerged Paul Heyman, Brock Lesnar's longtime advocate and one of wrestling's most electrifying figures. Heyman gripped the microphone with the intensity that suggested this wasn't going to be a typical victory speech. His eyes burned with the same fire that fans remember from his ECW days, when he was the voice of rebellion, the mouthpiece of chaos. Heyman didn't celebrate. He didn't dance or mock. Instead, he stood still, stared at the audience, and began to speak. And what followed was far from the usual promo hype. Heyman delivered a message that sliced through the veneer of sports entertainment with surgical precision. "What you just witnessed wasn't a wrestling match," he said, his voice gravelly but deliberate. "It wasn't sports entertainment. It was the truth." Finally breaking through 20 years of lies. Behind the curtain, the illusion of hustle, loyalty, and respect. Heyman peeled back the curtain on a wrestling world most fans only glimpsed through cracks in the corporate facade. He spoke of a fantasy long sold to the audience, one built on hustle, loyalty, and respect, where the good guy always wins against the odds. But behind that fantasy, Heyman revealed, lay a harsher reality. For decades, he explained, you've been sold heroes. Manufactured moments, a storybook where the chosen ones rise and the rest wither in the shadows. His voice cracked with emotion. But the truth is, it's all been dictated by marketing teams, corporate agendas, and focus groups. This wasn't a mere criticism, it was a reckoning. Wrestling fans know the drill. Flashy promos, choreographed storylines, and scripted finishes designed to maximize merchandise sales and viewer ratings. But Heyman was accusing the entire system of betrayal, of sacrificing authenticity for profitability. The targeted attack, John Cena and the corporate machine. With unflinching precision, Heyman zeroed in on the man who had come to symbolize this corporate machine, John Cena. "John Cena," Heyman said, voice dropping to a hushed, almost reverential tone that carried through the silent arena. "You represent everything wrong with this industry." For nearly 15 years, Cena had been the unquestioned face of WWE. Heyman described him as the corporate chosen golden boy, spoon-fed opportunities while more deserving talent withered on the vine. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and electric. Some booed, outraged at the perceived disrespect, while others cheered, relieved to hear aloud what many had whispered in private. Heyman's critique was damning. Cena was not just a wrestler, but a marketing creation masquerading as a wrestler. He was a sanitized product, engineered for mass appeal rather than genuine competition or athletic authenticity. Brock Lesnar, wrestling's authentic beast. Then came the contrast, sharp and clear. Brock Lesnar was no product of focus groups or marketing meetings. He was a force of nature, a legitimate athlete who had proven himself not just inside the squared circle, but in the unforgiving world of UFC. While Cena was making movies and hosting game shows, Heyman explained, my client was breaking people's backs and conquering legitimate combat sports. Heyman framed Lesnar's victory as something far bigger than a wrestling match. Tonight wasn't David versus Goliath. Tonight was reality versus fantasy, and reality doesn't care about your feelings. For wrestling purists, Heyman's words struck a nerve. Where had the true competition gone? Where was the grit, the danger, the legitimate threat to the body and spirit that wrestling once promised? Lesnar embodied those qualities, raw, primal, and brutal. Wrestling's dirty secret, a business gone soft. Paul Heyman's promo wasn't just a fiery rant against individual wrestlers, it was a scathing indictment of the entire wrestling industry. He didn't mince words. This business has become soft, sanitized, and safe, Heyman declared with an unmistakable edge in his voice. What once was a brutal, unpredictable spectacle had been transformed into a carefully packaged product, engineered to appease advertisers, social media algorithms, and merchandise sales. Heyman didn't just criticize, he issued a call to arms. We've traded legitimate competition for social media metrics. We've replaced unpredictable outcomes with predetermined storylines designed to sell merchandise and sponsorships. For many fans, this was a brutal truth they had sensed but rarely heard voiced so bluntly. Heyman urged the audience to look past the smoke and mirrors, the flashy promos, the choreographed finishes, and confront a harsher reality. Wrestling isn't about who's most marketable, it's about who's the best fighter. This line struck a nerve. It reminded fans of a time when wrestling was raw, gritty, and honest, even if it was scripted. It was a sport that promised to test strength, will, and skill, not just market appeal. Challenging the narrative, the myth of never give up. Heyman then zeroed in on one of WWE's most iconic slogans, the rallying cry of John Cena fans everywhere, never give up. For many, that phrase has been more than just a catchphrase. It's a symbol of perseverance and hope. But to Heyman, it was a fairy tale spun by the company to create an illusion of heroism for a select few favored stars. Faces don't get handed 17 title reigns, Heyman said, his tone dripping with disdain. They don't bypass contender matches or erase losses by corporate decree. What you've cheered isn't heroism, it's nepotism with entrance music. The crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. Some shouted in outrage, fiercely defending their hero, while others nodded, feeling the sting of a truth they'd never quite dared to voice. Heyman had crystallized a deep frustration many longtime fans felt, but were afraid to say aloud. Behind the glitz and spectacle, the wrestling world had become a place where opportunity wasn't earned in the ring, but granted behind closed doors. Beyond wrestling, the MMA divide. Heyman broadened his critique, touching on a wider cultural divide between professional wrestling and legitimate combat sports, an issue that's long simmered beneath the surface of both worlds. Do you want to know why UFC fighters don't respect pro wrestling? He asked rhetorically, pausing as the crowd leaned in. Because they see John Cena getting treated like a legitimate fighter, while actual killers like Brock Lesnar get booked like attractions. This wasn't just an insult to Cena, it was a challenge to wrestling's entire narrative. Lesnar, a man who had conquered the brutal world of UFC and legit combat, was caught in a strange limbo, part athlete, part performer. Meanwhile, wrestlers with flashy personas but limited in-ring credibility were often elevated as main event stars. Heyman's words underscored Lesnar's unique position as a bridge between worlds, a symbol of authenticity in an industry too often driven by marketing and spectacle. Aftermath. Wrestling's cultural reckoning. The fallout from Heyman's promo was immediate and widespread. Podcasts dedicated hours to dissecting every word, every inflection. Wrestling schools studied his delivery as a masterclass in promo work, examining how raw emotion and carefully crafted storytelling could coexist. Film studies courses analyzed the narrative layers embedded within what some might dismiss as just sports entertainment. Marketing experts marveled at how Heyman evoked such authenticity in a scripted medium, bridging the gap between reality and performance. Heyman's speech transcended wrestling. It became a cultural moment, a powerful reminder that even predetermined outcomes can evoke real emotion, challenge entrenched norms, and spark genuine change. Conclusion. The echo of truth. When Paul Heyman finally dropped the microphone, the arena fell into a rare, reverent silence. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, but the echo of his words rippled far beyond WrestlePalooza that night. This wasn't just a post-match promo. It was a manifesto, a rallying cry for an industry wrestling with its own identity crisis. Wrestling could be predetermined yet authentic, scripted yet deeply emotional, entertainment yet legitimate competition. With that chilling, prophetic declaration, Paul Heyman reminded the world why he is not merely an advocate or mouthpiece. He is the voice of wrestling's soul. The truth had been spoken, and there was no turning back.